Hello, I'm Dr. Craig Steingraber here at the Summit Healthplex, and welcome back to Naturally Healthy. Now, last week I introduced to you some different concepts of how our body works. Very, very basic. And as you know on the show, that we talk about natural methods on feeling better and being healthier. And I mentioned last week as well that there are two main body systems that contribute to how our body functions, feels, and how healthy we are. It's the human nervous system and the biochemistry or metabolic components of our body. And they all function through natural things. Now, I want to start out for the next few shows taking you through components of how the human nervous system works. Now, we're going to attach how our metabolism or our biochemistry helps that function as well. But I want to take you through some body maps, so to speak, today, and how we actually feel or sense things, because our human nervous system, the nervous system, reacts to what we feel and what we sense. So I want to take you through some of those senses and elaborate more specifically on certain aspects of those senses. And quite potentially here in the next few shows, we'll break down some of those senses even more, like sight, smell, sound, okay? But I'm going to briefly talk about those here in a minute. But as I mentioned before, many people, virtually everybody, when they understand some of the basics about how our body functions, they get better faster. They are healthier. It takes your involvement in that aspect of your overall health, and hopefully this is going to shed some light on that aspect and help you understand how we feel things today. Okay? Now, I'm going to go over this very quickly. All of this is very complex, of course, but I'm going to try and make this a layman's way of understanding it. So I'm going to go over this next section very quickly. And this has to do with how our nerves sense something. And essentially, our nerves react through electrical aspects and chemical aspects. Now, think of if you take a plant that's in the soil and you pull it out of the soil. What do you see within the soil? A lot of roots. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are very tiny. So I'm going to use this basic analogy and think of the nerves that sense or feel things in our body, whether it's in an organ, in the back of our eye, in our nasal passages, in our inner ear, on our tongue, or in our skin, or in our muscles, and I could go on and on. Think of a lot of those little root-like structures that are embedded within those areas. And those little root-like structures, they sense things. And when something, whether it's a touch, that aspect of our skin, there are little nerves, like those little roots that I just explained or used it as an analogy. There's little roots right on the surface of the skin and, of course, much deeper in muscles, etc., that sense this touch. Now, when that nerve, or that aspect of the skin, I should say, senses that touch, this is kind of what happens. Now, I'm going to go to my little whiteboard here. And if you think back to your science, way back a long time ago, or maybe not that long ago, our science courses, we have a cell, correct? And within that cell, we have a lot of different things. But the way that aspect of touch is sensed is different cells become activated. And what happens is we have different types of minerals, like Na or sodium, okay? We have chloride. I swear this is going to be really quick, I hope. K for potassium. and Ca for calcium. I probably didn't have to put those abbreviations there, but I did, so there we go. Now, these are really the four main minerals that cause anything to be activated as far as within our nervous system to function. So what happens is we have sodium is very plentiful on the outside of this cell. Potassium is very plentiful in here, okay? Calcium is very plentiful in here. Chloride is outside the cell. So what happens is that when we have wind come across our skin, when we have a certain aspect of color come into the back of our eye, a certain sense of touch, a certain movement, what happens is this sodium rushes into the cell, this potassium rushes out of the cell, and these do the same things. Okay? So we have this interplay of sodium and potassium and chloride and calcium that goes in and out of that cell to create electricity, really. To create electricity. Because all of these, just like a battery, it has a positive charge and it has a negative charge, right? Okay? These things do too. That's a positive charge, that's a negative charge, positive and a positive charge. So when you have a certain amount of these things in a certain area, it creates an electrical charge. So that's one aspect of things that I want you to understand. So let's say your diet's crappy, and we get all this stuff from our diet. Now that's the electrical component of how a nerve transmits signals or transmits information. There's also a chemical component as well. Now that chemical component, let's say you have one nerve right here, and you have another nerve right here. And this electrical charge is coming down this nerve like this, and it reaches the end of that nerve. Well, when it reaches the end of that nerve, what can happen is that it will stimulate different chemicals to be released through this little space. And then there's a receiver, and whatever analogy you want to use as a receiver, a catcher's mitt or a baseball mitt, since it's that time of year, getting close to that time of year. Baseball playoffs receives this type of chemical. Receives it here and then causes some more nerve signaling to transmit down that nerve until whatever end point that it's going to. Let's take a look at this image here that talks about some of these different kinds of chemicals, or more specifically called neurotransmitters. You see at the top of the page there, glutamate. And if you go over to the middle, it says main projections. It says the entire CNS, meaning the central nervous system. Go down to the middle, acetylcholine, some of you may have heard of that, or norepinephrine, or dopamine is another neurotransmitter. People with Parkinson's disease have a decreased amount of dopamine. Serotonin is another one that is a very, very important neurotransmitter that is utilized to create different types of neurological responses or nerve signals. Now, those are very important chemical aspects that create a nerve impulse or signal, whether it's really certain aspects of our periphery in our body or certainly within the central nervous system. Those types of chemicals or neurotransmitters are extremely important. And there are natural products that we eat and drink in many of the cases that contribute to the production of those types of neurotransmitters, and that also have an effect on how our nervous system will function. Now we're going to get to some of those things in the near future, but what I want to try to do is build this story for you so you can understand how we sense things and where it goes. Now, as I've been mentioning, there are different senses that we have in our body that allow us to feel or see or hear or taste different things. And let's kind of go through those, because how our nervous system reacts and creates some kind of action, much of it is based on what we sense. So to change how our nervous system is functioning, for the better or for the worse, sometimes depends on what happens in that case, we have an effect on that nervous system by these senses. You can see in the top left where it says olfactory, that's odor. That's one sense. Optic, that's our ability to see something. The colors, etc., that we can see that creates a reaction. Now we're going to skip the one that says oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens because they're different ones. But we're going to go to Roman numeral 5, or the V, trigeminal. You can see that figure that it shows different components of our face, what we sense there, different aspects of movement or touch there. Now we come down to Roman numeral 8, there in the middle of the page essentially, that has that figure that kind of looks somewhat snail-like. Vestibular cochlear. Now that has to do with movement of our head to a certain degree and the fluid that moves to allow us to sense certain aspects of head movement, as well as our ability to hear. So we have smell, sight, touch in our face in this regard, now movement of our head as well as hearing. Now Roman numeral 9, glossopharyngeal it's called, to a certain degree has to do with taste. We talked about sight, smell, sound, some movement, as well as taste. Now we're going to go into a very, very important part of our senses as well. And that is what's called our somatic system, or the periphery of our body. Organs are included with this as well, but we're really going to talk about different aspects of our touch, movement, pain, etc. And when we have some of those nerves activated within our body, our peripheral body here. So this next image is going to show you certain aspects of our senses on our body. The purpose of this image is to let you understand, or help you understand, how different sections of our skin, and it's more technical than this, but we'll say even underneath our skin, is related to different segments of our spine. Now you see the different L's, L1, L5, S1, S3, C6, C7, for instance, in the hands. Those are all different aspects of our spinal or vertebral levels. So the nerves that exit and enter out of those certain levels supply different areas of our body. So you can localize at times different aspects of dysfunction or altered feelings to segments of our nervous system that have to do with our spine, as well as parts of our brain and spinal cord, which we'll get to in later shows. It's a very complicated image, obviously, but I wanted to throw this up there just to show you. On the left there, you see the C1 through the S's there numbered again. That's different aspects of our spine, and the C is at the C1 is at the base of our skull. The S5 is down at our tailbone area. You can see how those red lines correlate to different aspects of organ function as well. So there's different nerves within those organs that will send signals to parts of our spine and then up to, or parts of our spinal cord, or relative aspects of spinal cord, I should say, up to our brain to have a certain type of response. Now we've been talking about different nerves that are embedded in aspects of our skin, in our muscles, in our organs, and there are many different types of nerves.